First of all, I want to thank you for coming. I know we're competing with the bar. The last slot of the day, it's always the one you don't want to get the start. So we appreciate, Shellina and I, the fact that you came to listen to what we have to say today. Just by way of short introduction, in case you don't know, my name is Maybee, obviously. I'm not Shellina. And I'm Vice President of Technical Support for Research in Motion. So in that capacity, I have responsibility for all direct paid-for support with enterprises who use the Blackberry server products. And Shellina, do you want to?
And I'm Shellina Damji, and I work with Kepner-Tregoe in the capacity of a senior consultant and head of the North American technology practice.
So, we'll jump right to the results. I wanted to make it short, so you wouldn't have to. So you waited here longer than the presentation today. So, since we embarked on doing this transformation of the Premier Support Organization, the time to resolve cases has decreased by 39%. The case quality, or the way we document problem descriptions and so on within our CRM tool, has improved by 96%. Our escalations to the development organization have reduced by 35%, and our overall customer satisfaction has increased by 23 basis points. So this gives you sort of an idea of where we've gotten to so far. These results were based on a study and a review in July, so we actually expect to be beyond this by now, and we'll do another study at the end of the year to see what the July to end of the year improvement has been. So I presume you're actually here to know how we did this. I'm not going to spend time on the objectives. I presume you read those, and that's how you decided to come here. So we'll just move on. Blackberry Premium Support, just to give you a short description of it, is one part of the organization that I have the honor to run. The other part is the, as you might expect, non-premium support. And it's basically the volume business. So 98% of our customers who take out support contracts with us are non-premium support. So all this work we did is for 2% of our customers. But you know, they are our most strategic customers, our most important customers, our biggest customers, and our most demanding customers. And Premier Support really, as with most organizations, is intended to be the showcase for what we are capable of doing as a support organization. If we can't do it in Premier Support, we can't do it anywhere. So this is really where we focus a lot of our attention, because these customers are the ones that buy the most Blackberries and have a lot of influence on us. The folks that are in BPS, which I'll stop saying Blackberry Premium Support and just call it BPS from now on. The folks in BPS are an incredibly dedicated team of people. That's not to say that the people in other groups are not dedicated, they surely are, but we select very carefully for the people that we bring into BPS. They have to have not only technical skill, but they also have to have that sense of what you need to do to make a customer happy, and they need to have an understanding of relationships, and that relationships with customers are really, really important. Because our goal really is to establish a relationship. It's incredible, as you probably know, that in a crisis situation, if you've got a good relationship with a customer, things go a whole lot better than if you don't have a good relationship. So, how did we measure up as a team overall? Well, we were going through an incredible growth phase, as is RIM in general, for that matter. When I started 7 years ago with RIM, the support organization was 50 people, 53 people, in 2 support centers. 50 of them were in our headquarters in Waterloo, Ontario, and 3 people in the UK. As a whole, because we recently, about 6 months ago, we split the support organization into 2 groups, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. As a whole, the tech support organization is now over 1,200 people, so in 7 years it's grown from 50 to 1,200. And most of that growth has taken place in the last 4 years. And we've gone from basically 1 support center to now 5 globally distributed support centers. So all this growth meant that we were really struggling to keep up in the entire organization, but particularly in Premier Support. And we were struggling both at a macro level, which I think of is the organizational level, the structural level, and at the micro level, which is the individual tactical level that people work, the skills they have, the knowledge they have, how they use it, the processes they follow. And we weren't meeting customer expectations. And these struggles we had, both at macro and micro level, were coming internally and externally. So if we look at the internal challenges, as I said, growth was a big one. We've grown from 3 to 5 support centers in the previous 2 years. We had a whole bunch of new people, like lots of new people. And so this meant that the groups, what had previously been essentially a single Premier Support organization located in one office, was now in 5 offices. Some of these people had never met each other, so the internal relationships and the cohesiveness of the group didn't exist anymore. As you would expect with all these people, we had a whole variety of skills. Some people were really, really, really good troubleshooters. Other people were just good troubleshooters. Some people had lots and lots of technical knowledge. Other people had just some, good technical knowledge. And there was all kinds of mixing and matching of those skills. And so it was really hard for customers to know what they were going to get from us. And we were becoming less efficient. Just the sheer scale of it meant that communication was breaking down between people, and the efficiency with which we solved problems was breaking down along with it. As a result of these things, customer complaints from our Premier Support customers were increasing. They were losing the personal relationship they wanted with us. They were used to, some of these customers had been with us one customer had been with us before we even had Premier Support. They actually drove us to develop it. And they were used to talking to a very small group of people, like 5. When they'd call, they'd talk to 1 to 5 people. And so they knew the people they were talking to, the people knew them, the people knew their environments, and they could just get right to troubleshooting and solving problems rather than asking the usual questions, well, who are you, and what do you have, and how many servers do you have, and all that kind of stuff. And the customers, they as you might expect, they didn't like that too much. And they were saying, every time I call, I get a different person. Well, that's not an unusual complaint in a volume-based support organization where you've got thousands of customers and hundreds of support reps. I mean, it's really hard to try and create some kind of relationship there. But in our organization, it was not acceptable to the customers or, frankly, to us. So we knew we had to do something, and customers could see it. I mean, they were telling us, like, you guys are having problems, and you need to do something to solve these problems. And all of it was leading to longer resolution times, and as it says at the bottom here, the real thing was the whole value proposition of why customers bought Premier Support was disappearing. They weren't getting what they thought they bought anymore. On the external side, again, it was growth in our customer. More customers wanted Premier Support. The customers that wanted it were getting much bigger as far as their Blackberry deployments were going. When I started 7 years ago, our largest customer, I think had 7,000 or 8,000 Blackberries at the time. Our largest customer now has over 50,000 Blackberries, and we have lots of customers who have 20 and 30,000 Blackberries. And they're distributed in an infrastructure that's around the world. So they've got very complicated environments that they're trying to manage with lots of people on them. And it used to be, again, initially it was an executive, almost a toy, if you will. I mean, sure, they used it to keep up to date with the office, but people were buying Blackberries because Bob got it because Fred had one on the golf course yesterday, and now I went back to my IT guy and said, you give me one of those, because I had to have, I wasn't going to get it done by the CEO of this other company. I had to have one too. And so it came in, which was unique because it came in at the top of companies. Usually stuff comes in at the bottom, and it's years before you let the executives touch it. And this started at the top, so it was a crisis every time something went wrong. But it was becoming more of a crisis now because in those days, oh sure, the CEO was screaming and people were dancing and trying to keep her or him happy. But now companies would lose millions of dollars. I mean, we have banks who every one of their traders has a BlackBerry, and when they can't use the BlackBerry, true hard millions of dollars are lost. So they get really stressed when it doesn't work. So in addition to just this sort of environment change, just their overall expectations were changing. I said that the relationship was going down, that we had this personal relationship because of our scale. The customer's expectation of this relationship was going up. So we had sort of what we were delivering going like this and what they wanted going like this, so the gap between what we were delivering and what they expected of us was increasing. They wanted faster resolution time, again, going back to that losing money thing. And a key thing for us was they wanted more visibility into what we were doing. They wanted to know when they phoned us that we would react in a predictable way, in a consistent way every time. It wasn't going to be the luck of the draw when they phoned on who they got and how well they understood the product, or what, how they would escalate, when they would escalate, and so on. They wanted predictability and consistency from us, and they wanted transparency on how we were going to do it. They wanted us to tell them what we're going to do, when, and how. So, I guess the last point is we work with three mail platforms: Microsoft Exchange, Lotus Domino, and GroupWise. And the majority of our customers are either on Exchange or Domino. IBM and Microsoft are much bigger customers than them. Our support organizations are much bigger customer organizations than we are. But the expectations that they were setting with customers were being translated to us. So customers expected us to behave in the exact same way that IBM and Microsoft were behaving with them. And we had to do it without having nearly the scale. But they didn't care about that. They just do it. So we were falling quite short of delivering our promise to customers to meet the expectations or exceed the expectations they had of us. So it was a call for action. It sort of felt like the first step of a 12-step program. We had to admit we had a problem, and then we move on to addressing the problem. So we did admit it wasn't too hard. The customers were telling us on a fairly regular basis, and so we decided we needed to formulate a vision. Where did we want to go? What roadmap would get us to where we wanted to be? Well, the first thing we said is we wanted to be a world-class service organization. Sounds great, right? What the hell does it mean? And how do you get there? Does it mean the same thing to everybody? And how do you make sure that you're actually delivering on it? And for that matter, where is there? Like, you want to get there, but we didn't really know where there was. We just had this lofty statement that we were going to be world class. And how do we ensure that as we go through this transformation to get there, wherever there ends up being, that the transformation is successful and we don't fail? I'll talk about another methodology we introduced a couple of years ago, which didn't go so well, and we did fail at, and lessons we learned from that we used as we embarked on this transformation. So it was about this time that we started talking with KT. We actually started the discussions, for the most part, 3 years ago at the SSPA conference here in Vegas when it was down at Mandalay Bay. If any of you were here for that conference, the year was supposed to have been in New Orleans, but unfortunately Katrina changed those plans. And in the early discussions, we realized that the sort of approach that KT took to service strategy, developing a service strategy, matched really well with the way we thought we wanted to go. And the two cultures of the companies were such that we thought we could work really well together. So the first step we took with KT was we asked them to facilitate a series of strategy sessions for us so that we could figure out where there was and what we were going to do. So it was over about 2 months, I think, and it was, I think, 5 days spread over 2 months. We did a couple of days, and then there were a few weeks where we had work to do, and then another couple of days, and then a few weeks, and then another couple of days. And in those sessions, we did the usual things that you would do. We did SWOT analysis to figure out what we were good at. And we identified who our customers were and who we were, and what services we wanted to provide. And at the end of this effort, we had a document that laid out where we wanted to go and how we were going to get there. And one result was a massive reorganization of the entire Blackberry technical support team, not just in Premier Support. It was like the whole team went through some major structural changes that have been very good. So we started our transformation, and the thing was, I find a lot of people do organizational change because it's been 18 months since they last did organizational change. And it just seems like it's time to do it again. And, we had to remember to ourselves as we went through this process why we were doing it. And that whatever we did, it had to be from listening to our customers and responding to what they were telling us. So we didn't end up at the end of this different, but still not addressing their needs. So we set out a set of guiding principles for ourselves. And the first one, of course, was that customer satisfaction is everything. It doesn't matter anything else. At the end of the day, customer satisfaction, how happy your customers are with what you're doing is all that matters. Sure, like us, you guys measure all kinds of things within your organizations. We've got KPIs all over the place, and they help you run the business, but at the end of the day, it's how satisfied are your customers that matters. We had to get back to this small team feeling that I alluded to earlier, where customers felt like they were dealing with a small team of people in premium support, and they wouldn't notice the scale of the organization. So we needed to get closer to them through improving the relationship. We wanted to be more proactive so we could try and avoid crisis rather than just dealing with crisis better. And we had to be constantly improving. We recognized the fact that this wasn't going to be just sort of one effort we go through over some number of months and then say, done. And in order to do this, we needed to develop some common procedures that meant two requirements: that they had clear goals for what they were trying to accomplish, clear metrics to measure whether they accomplished that, and obviously then that they actually achieved the results we wanted. And we had to be transparent with these. We want to show them to customers so they can see what we're doing. And then, of course, as I talked about a minute ago, we needed to be predictable and consistent and efficient in what we were doing. So it really broke down into two buckets, what we realized we had to do. We had to do structural changes to realign the organization to meet the needs that customers wanted. And we had to do the procedural changes. We didn't know yet what they were going to be. We had to do procedural changes so that we could work in a way that met these expectations that customers had. So on the structural side, we did a few cool things. We had been organized in a fairly typical fashion from what I can gather. We had sort of the technical team of all the analysts who solved problems, and we had a team of enterprise support account managers, as we call them. They're basically account managers who look after the relationship with the Premium Support customers, just between our organization and their IT organization or their technical organization, to make sure that the right things happen at the right times, and they do reporting and that sort of stuff. But we had one team over here and one team over here. So the first thing we did is we created these integrated service delivery teams, or in our terminology, stripes, where we took some people from this team, some people from this team, we put them together, put a team lead in charge, and then took a subset of customers and said, those are your customers. And we just kept doing that, just building, building, building. So we have these stripes, several stripes, and from a customer's point of view, Premium Support was only as big as their stripe. The fact that we'd have 7, 10, 20, 50 other stripes wasn't going to matter to them, because except for times of coverage or time zone stuff, they didn't deal with those other stripes. For most of the time, they talked to a small team of people, and they just wouldn't notice the scale. It would be like it had been in the old days. We also introduced this new role of Premium Service Manager. The ESAMs, or these account managers, work fairly transactionally with mainly the administrators who run the Blackberry solution within the company, maybe their team lead. But we needed to have a relationship at a higher level with the management and senior management that ran the infrastructure, so when a crisis happened, they would have comfort that somebody else was involved, and there was an escalation point. The Premium Service Managers also coach the SAMs, especially if they're new SAMs, to help them get up to speed. We've had an incredible amount of feedback, positive feedback from customers on this role. They love it. They just feel that we are now giving them so much more attention, particularly in times of crisis, that they weren't getting from us before. The last thing we had to do, and this goes back to those expectations that IBM and Microsoft have been kind enough to set for us, we need to get some of our SAMs out more local to the customer. When a crisis happens, Microsoft or IBM, they're on site within, well, if they're not on site all the time, which is true in a lot of customers, they're just there all the time, they can be on site in a relatively short amount of time. We have to fly somebody. So if it happens late in the day, the earliest we're probably going to be on site is sometime tomorrow. And so we're going to start hiring these people locally in areas where we have high concentrations of Premium Support customers, like New York. Not that the New York people are demanding. The procedural changes, this was a tougher one, really, because we didn't really have a sense of what we needed. And we looked at a lot of options. Internally, we tried to thought, well, could we develop procedures ourselves that would address these issues of consistency and so on, or do we need to look externally? And we looked externally at a number of different companies, and I won't mention who they were, But at the end of the day, we came back to KT and said, you know, the KT resolve process was going to be the process that was going to allow us to meet these expectations. We worked with KT before. In fact, and one of our directors, who's based in the UK, had taken, I don't think it was called Resolve at the time, but had taken essentially the methodology training many years before when he worked for a different company. So we did, of course, our due diligence. We talked to some of the big customers. I went and visited one in the UK who uses it in their global support organization, bigger than ours. We started sending people to the public classes that KT runs to get their feedback on what they thought of the methodology and see, like, when they came back with it, were they going to say, hey, that's good, we should do that, or let's move on. Well, I don't know, I'm not quite sure what KT does with the food and the water and the drink and stuff when they, people go on these courses, because these people came back and they were raving maniacs about the process. And it's like they found some new religion and they couldn't wait until we did something. So after we'd sent, I don't know, 8 or 10 of these people on this course, and they all came back with the same way. It's like, maybe we're onto something here, and we should do this. And sort of a side benefit that we didn't start off this way was when we decided that we would introduce it, we now had these evangelists sort of spread out in the organization who were talking to their peers and friends and colleagues and stuff about the methodology. So it made buy-in easier because we already had people in there who understood it, and it wasn't. And they were trying to pull it. They were talking to us saying, when are you going to implement this? When are you going to bring this in? So it wasn't just, you know, a bunch of lunatic senior management people pushing something down on them and then going, no, leave me alone, I'm too busy. The interesting thing about it is it's not just, and this was the drawback to some of the other stuff we looked at, it's a troubleshooting step-by-step methodology meant for the break-fix world. Resolve is not that. It's a problem-solving. It could be any problem. I used it to figure out which car I should buy a year ago because I couldn't decide. We've had people use it to decide whether they should take a new role that was being offered to them. Did they want to do it? Did they not want to do it? One guy used it to resolve some of his marital problems. You know, so you can use it in all kinds of ways that aren't just break-fix or work-related. And quite frankly, they're the gold standard in the industry. You know, too many times we get pitched by companies with it's a new methodology, and you wonder, is it going to be around? And I mean, how many times have we seen a methodology come in and it's gone 3 or 4 or 5 times? KT's been at this methodology one way or another for many, many years. And it also aligns well with ITIL, which we're introducing into our organization through our problem management group. And next year, when we launch our major upgrade of our CRM system, it's going to have ITIL embedded into it. So I'm going to hand it over to Shellina now to talk a little bit more about what Resolve is, because she'll do a much better job at it.
Okay, the KT Resolve value proposition, basically what KT Resolve is, it's a methodology that where we'll come in and help embed some critical thinking skills into your organization and make the cultural change happen and make that cultural change sustainable in the long term as well. So the troubleshooting training that Brian has talked about, we implemented that. That's part of KT Resolve. And also with the troubleshooting training, it isn't enough to just send people to the training. We wanted to make sure that as we embed and change the procedural stuff that Brad has talked about, that we actually integrate those processes into their organization, into their tools, for example, into their way of troubleshooting with a customer. We also looked at, if you're going to make this behavioral change happen within your people, you want to make sure you also introduce a performance system that aligns with that. So in other words, make the expectations clear of what it is that they wanted to do, as well as put in some rewards and consequences so that people were actually using the processes and the critical thinking skills that they learned in the training. And then, of course, we also looked at, that's not enough to also do that. We wanted to make sure that it was continuing and people had somewhere to go when they had an issue or when they weren't quite sure how to do something. So we developed some coaches internally within RIM to coach using our processes and on our processes so that people were actually using the skills again that they received in training. The end result here is we wanted to make sure we increase customer satisfaction, we reduce time that time to resolve an issue, and also we wanted to ultimately reduce service costs. The troubleshooting methodology itself, and some of you, if you know KT or some who don't, will find this interesting because it's really a 4-part process in critical thinking skills. It's really looking at a situation appraisal, which is a middle triangle there, which says when a customer first calls you, you want to understand what the situation is. You want to make sure you understand what their concerns are, how to prioritize those concerns, and then make sure you understand what the next steps are that you need to put in place. And if you find that in the situation appraisal, you've identified that there is a problem that needs resolving in terms of finding a root cause, then you then look at a problem analysis process, which is this red piece down there, which looks at how do you really find root cause? What are the procedures? What's the methodology that actually gets you to the end result, the actual root, so that you can do something about it and that problem never happens again? But if you also look at, you know what the root cause is, now you have to look at what kinds of solutions do you want to put in place to address that root cause. There might be different solutions, so you want to look at a decision analysis process to very quickly identify what's the objectives, what's the stakeholders, who's going to be impacted, and what's the best solution to put in place as a result of that. But we all also know that once a solution is put in place, potential problems could also happen as a result of that. So the yellow section, back up there, looks at a potential problem analysis process, which then goes into, well, you know, let's identify what could go wrong when we put the solution in place, and therefore, what can we do to prevent that from happening, and how can we put in some contingencies in case that happens. Now, at BPS, the engagement that we were involved in is to really make this cultural change happen. We first had to go in and analyze exactly what their environment was all about. And we had a team of consultants that sort of lived at BPS for about a week and looked at exactly, you know, what exactly they were doing, how they were relating to their customers, what their cases looked like, what's the quality of documentation that they did, what was their troubleshooting methodology, and what was successful and working, and where were there gaps that we needed to fill in. We then looked at designing a solution based on the analysis and the gaps that we identified within that, and these were customized solutions that we put in place for them. We also then delivered, we actually ran some classes, some training classes for them. We helped develop some process coaches. We helped develop program leaders within their organization, meaning we trained their trainers to train our training courses so that they can go and do it on their own. But then we also looked at, you know, what's the way we can integrate that into their processes and into their performance systems. We then also took all that information and ran another analysis at the end of a pilot project that we did and documented all of those results. And in order to sustain it, you know, there are some recommendations that are being made and that they're diligently working on to make sure that what they've put in place so far and the results they've been able to achieve is sustainable. So this is a very complicated chart. I'm not going to go through it in great detail, but basically what we did was over a 4 to 6 month period, we went in and we helped transform their Blackberry Premium Support in a procedural fashion. So what we did was we went and we looked at this analysis, as I said, and then we did some training sessions around our troubleshooting methodology, both with management and with some key people in their organization. From those key people, we chose people who were leaders in their organization who could then get trained in becoming trainers and lead this effort in the organization as well. And then we also chose some coaches, some people who weren't necessarily, you know, built to actually go and teach this, but who were also leaders who could go and coach their people around this methodology. And together with that, we looked at implementing a process design change where we help to look at the way their tools work and help to identify what they needed to do with their tools and develop and help their people develop a tool to help make it easier for their people to actually use this methodology. We also help design a performance system. So we put in some expectations, some communications with their people. We help put in some performance measures in their reviews, some incentives on a short-term, long-term basis. And we also then looked at a feedback loop back to help change that behavior and give them the results that they really wanted. The program leaders then took the initiative and trained the rest of the BPS staff around the world. So there were local implementations that happened in the 5 support centers that Brad talked about. We then used coaches to help coach those people who were trained, and KT also provided some coaching support and some implementation support in the 5 different regions to make sure that these skills were embedded and the cultural change was happening as well. So that's what this chart talks about.
So, as with anything, when you introduce change into an organization, you can expect some level of resistance. Interestingly enough, we didn't have a lot of resistance to the structural changes we made. People just seemed to get it. They understood that it was just going to be needed. And it wasn't threatening to anybody. Realigning these teams and stuff wasn't viewed as threatening. So they just, for the most part, they accepted it. However, when we started introducing the methodology, even though we had these maniacal evangelists in the organization, there was some resistance, and it was expected. There were people who, the response would be, well, I've been troubleshooting for 10 years and fixing things. I don't need some kind of process to help me do it. I already know how to do it. And these people, so they resisted, and they didn't want it. And even the training class that I took, there were a couple of guys who started off on day 1 of the training class like, they weren't going to have this at all. It wasn't going to be good. They'd already. But by the end of the course, they were like, hey, this is pretty cool. We like this. And I don't know how they managed to get that, whatever it is they put in their food, in our food, but they managed to do it. So there's still a couple of people out there who are resistant, but we're slowly winning them over. So this slide is going to be for Shellina to talk about, but just before I give it back to Shellina, I mentioned earlier that we had implemented another methodology and that we didn't do very well, and we had taken the lessons from that, and what we tried to do is we tried to implement the knowledge-centered support methodology, or KCS, if any of you use it. And the reason it failed is because we didn't, David, oops, what did I do? There we go. David Kay is sitting over here, and he was helping us with KCS. And the reason it failed has absolutely nothing to do with David and everything to do with the fact that we didn't listen to him. He'd say, do this. We'd say, no, we know that. We're going to do this. Of course, it all failed. We're doing it again. David's still with us, helping us. We're listening to it. It's much better. So we decided that we better, take that lesson and apply it here. And since KT are the experts on this stuff, we thought, let's just listen to what they tell us and not decide that we know better the first time. And they've done, I don't know how many, dozens and dozens and dozens of these over dozens of years. And so that was, we humbled ourselves. But
So basically, making change happen isn't easy. And they were transforming their organization, and this was a major change initiative that they were going through. So with any change initiative, there are some criteria of success. And over a few years that we have been in business, which by the way, this is our 50th year that we're in business, we have learned over time that there are things that we need to do it right. So the first thing we did was we said we wanted this to be an effort where there was top management support, and we needed a project sponsor. And Brad was our project sponsor here, and anything that went wrong, he was the ultimate person that was accountable for that, but also any decisions that people were resisting over, he was also the person accountable to make that decision. We also wanted to make sure that within the management, the middle management, there was commitment that this was going to happen, because we were going to need them to help make this change happen. And we have Mike Morse sitting right here, who's one of the managers who was instrumental in making this particular change happen with the results that we've seen. Also, we wanted to make sure that the KT Resolve project was structured right. And we had the project managers both from the KT side, but also from the RIM side, the Blackberry support side, in the 5 regions, so that there was that commitment, there was that project management on site as well, and making sure that it happened regionally, because not everything could be controlled centrally. And of course, we wanted to also reinforce the results that we had agreed on up front with the metrics during the analysis phase that we did, that we said were important to BPS to achieve. So that's the change effort that we went through, and this could apply to any change effort, not just what we did with the KT Resolve implementation.
Okay. So what we measured, we had to obviously have some measures to figure out whether we had achieved the results that we had set out to achieve when we decided to implement. Well, when we did all the changes, but particularly implementing KT Resolve. So we decided on these metrics: average time to resolve, time to close a case, obviously. The average time to resolve, and how that was affected by the number of agents analysts who had been involved in the case. The percentage of escalations to SDS, which is sort of our interface into development, and the average time to close those escalations. And the quality of the documentation within the case. How well were people documenting the problem specification, the description of the problem, and what they did, and so on. And then finally, customer satisfaction.
How did you measure quality of documentation? Is that just a sampling?
It was a sampling, yeah. And KT has been instrumental in doing that for us, so it's sort of as a third party looking at it. Eventually we'll take it over, but in the two that I referred to as we look at these stats, in December '07 and July of '08, that was done on a sampling of cases by some KT folks.
So you had a pre-audit process going into it.
They looked at cases leading up to December '07 and summarized results from that, and then looked at the cases from January to July and summarized the results of that. So these results are as of July, when we hadn't even finished training everybody. We didn't yet have the coaching methodology totally embedded, and we didn't have the coaching system running at all. So, what these sort of show is that the width of the box indicates the resolve time, and the height of the box is the volume of calls. So if we look at the dark scene, this was a group where we expected to see some of the most dramatic impact, because it's the most complicated cases. So in the pre-implementation phase, this group did 51 calls, and it took them an average of 44 days to resolve those cases. In the post-implementation, in the first 6-7 months of this year, they did 115 calls, and it only took them 27 days. So that's pretty good, but the first thing I wanted to know was, could we attribute this to, and because we're still growing, we didn't stop or freeze our headcount, could we attribute this to just the fact that we had more people who would, maybe they had more time so they could focus more of their time on solving cases, and that would explain everything? Well, so we went and we looked at that, and if you look at it, I have a cheat sheet here, because I can remember all the stats, but so call volume in this period increased by 125% from 51 to 115, but our staff only increased by 43%. So volume went up 125%, staff went up 43%, and resolve time went down by 38%. And so that's pretty good. I mean, we were doing more and being more efficient with relatively more work for every individual to do. And that translates in somewhat less dramatic ways to each of the primary groups. The only group that has stayed pretty static, but they were our best group to begin with, is the DART exchange. DART is Direct Advanced Response Team, that's what we call it. Their call volume went up by 21%, their staff went up by 21%, and the time to resolve went down by 2%. So hasn't been a lot of change there yet, but we're continuing to look at it. This is this time to resolve by number of analysts involved. You can see in the before phase, I mean, it ramps up. It's pretty much the same after. Then it gets it's chaotic. And one misinterpretation you could make of this was 6 agents need to be involved, right? When the 5th agent gets it, just have them immediately send it to the 6th person. Don't even do anything. And that 6th person may not send it to anybody else. And you'll even do better than when you have 4 people. So, but we somehow suspected that wasn't the right interpretation. But you'll see in the after phase here, with people using common language, common ways to document, common ways to capture the problem description, it levels out quite a bit when you start getting into more than 3 agents. The effect is not nearly as dramatic. We're still looking at this to find out why, as it goes from 1, 2, and 3, why it still goes up quite significantly. There may be an element here that just has to do that the 2nd agent is actually more senior analyst than the 1st agent, so it's a more complex case. So this reflects escalation as much as it does just having another person involved. But we're still trying to understand that. This is the quality, the overall quality of the case. I mean, it's quite astounding. Before we implemented, 75% of our cases had vague or no description of the problem. And so it's pretty easy to understand why when it went to another person who had to pick it up because that first person was on vacation or had to go to our Singapore support center because of to continue work overnight or something, why they would struggle with it because they got this case and they had no idea what it was about. And then they had to ask the customer, of course, which you can imagine, for those of you who do this, how happy the customer is to repeat everything they just did for the previous few hours with the person that they were working with. Since we've implemented this methodology, only 23% of our cases have vague and incomplete documentation. So that's quite an improvement. 50% of our cases now have either excellent or very good documentation on what the case is about. And this just looks at even specifically in case quality with the problem description. And that's whether in KT it's called the object and deviation. It's like what is not doing what you think and how is it not doing it. Like the problem description has to have this is broken in this way, just not it don't work. That doesn't really help anybody else. So beforehand, 57% of our cases had this object deviation structure where they actually said sort of what was broken and how it was broken. But now 98% of our cases have that structured description of the problem. And the other element in here that's not mentioned here is and is not data. Something natural troubleshooters do is like, when doesn't it work? When is it having the problem? And in what ways is it not having the problem? So you can rule out things, right? And before, almost none of our cases have that is not data, and very few had the proper is data. Now that also is very high. This, by the way, KT tells me this 98% is a new standard. Nobody's ever reached 98% before, especially in such a short amount of time. So that's good for Mike and his cohort, Steve, and the effort they put in with their team to get us there. Customer satisfaction, before it was 8.57, now it's 8.8. I mean, it doesn't look like a lot, but moving customer satisfaction every little bit, so we went 23 basis points, that's not insignificant. And we have a target of 9.25. So we're still not at our target, but we're getting closer. And again, this is July data, so when we remeasure, we'll see where we are now. And that's it. We do have, before we move on, the key thing that we have to focus on now is we can't take our eye off the ball. We aren't done. We've just sort of got everybody trained. We've got the coaching system in, and now we have to keep focusing on it and make sure that the methodology stays healthy and active and vibrant within Premier Support. We're also going to start looking to implement the methodology into the parts of the non-Premier Support organization, so it'll gradually spread out through the entire Blackberry Technical Support organization. But we can't just sort of say, well, it's done over there and then move over here. We have to keep focusing on this part over here as we continue to grow and evolve, and our customers' expectations of us continue to escalate. So that's it. Before you head off to the bar, what questions do you have for us? And pretty static.